Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV of the 80s and 90s and ask the question...
Does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood?
My name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And today we are looking at Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Saturday morning cartoon from the 1980s. You can find that on YouTube, and the specific episodes that we watched for today will be linked on our blog, Watch With Us. So you can stop by StopRuiningMyChildhood.com and check that out. And also on the blog will be a link for our snack today,
which is Peeps.
It is April, and so we're getting ready for Easter, and this month we're going to be looking at nostalgic Easter candy that we remember as kids. I have not had Peeps in a long time, have you?
No, because I am not a huge fan of Peeps.
I don't think that I'm a huge
fan. From what I remember.
I don't think I'm a huge fan of Peeps either, but they have kind of a neat history, and also I found it, if I can link it, it's a rainbow Peeps pop. So there's 4 different Peeps all layered up on a stick.
And there is a blue, a red, and a green one, just like Simon, Alvin, and Theodore.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes. So we're going to wrap this. You want the yellow?
Yeah, I guess so.
Right.
I mean, give me one that has nothing to do with the Chipmunks.
We're not going to microwave them, but that was the childhood thing. If you put a Peep in a microwave, it's like it is marshmallow essentially, right?
Yes.
If you put a Peep in a microwave, it will become like a giant Peep before collapsing in on itself or exploding all over the microwave.
So for you out there in podcast land who have never had a Peep,
I'm gonna take the green.
It is a marshmallow shaped like quasi a duck, coated in colored sugar.
Yeah, and they used to have a more definitive shape. So these were actually invented by this man, Samuel Bourne. And Sam Bourne was a Russian immigrant. In 1910, he formed a candy company called Just Born because he wanted to make candy fresh every day. So by 1953, they had been hand forming each individual Peep and then piping on wings. Mm-hmm. And the person who bought the company took over that process, and instead of taking like 23 hours for a whole batch, it was like 6 minutes. So they were done by machine, and they were no longer hand formed, and they no longer had the wings. And then they started doing different shapes for different times of the year. So they have, if you have seen like ghost shaped Peeps for Halloween.
Yeah.
And they have a bunny Peep as well for Easter, because that's like really their biggest thing. But Steve just ate his and made a face. Now I'm afraid to try mine.
So the thing about the Peep is this. This is the quandary. I like real marshmallows.
Yeah.
I like fluff. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I do not care for whatever marshmallow monstrosity they use to create Peeps.
It's the sugar on the outside.
It's also the inside. It's just not, I don't know.
Because it's in between a marshmallow and fluff.
But I like both those
either.
Things, and I hate this bastardization of marshmallow that is here.
That's not nice. But, what I was going to tell you is that Just Born, they also started Mike and Ike's and Hot Tamales. Okay. Other nostalgic snacks. And he had a different method for getting the lollipop stick into the lollipop.
Okay.
So he really kind of revolutionized candy, and I think it's kind of an interesting story. I wish that I could have... they have some chocolate ones and they have some flavored ones. I feel like I might have had a chocolate one that wasn't that bad. This, I can't eat the whole thing. The sugar on the outside is so sweet. But it's just like hurting my tongue. I won't talk with my mouth full on the podcast. But it's like almost hurting my tongue. It's so sweet.
So out of Chipmunks, you know what? No, Chipmunk is too on the nose for today. No. So out of 5 musical notes... what do we give Peeps? Peeps
are like somebody singing where they almost hit the C and then it's like a little bit flat. Like maybe one musical note. I'm sorry to the Just Born company who was taken over by, whatever candy company they are now. One. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm giving Peeps one generous music note. and they can take that note and go back to hell where they belong.
No, stop it. That's not a nice thing to say. We're like, let's do Easter candy. Peeps can go right to hell. That's so horrible. Yeah, for me, it's just too sweet, too much sugar on top. And even as a kid, I don't think I love them. But hey, if you like Peeps, that's great. There is a page you can follow called I Hate Peeps on Facebook. So other people feel the way we do.
They're one step above circus peanuts, which will never
We're
be
never
reviewed
gonna
on
do
this show
peanuts.
because the smell makes me nauseous.
Yeah, we've said that before. The circus peanuts, there's a couple of things. Hot balls.
I love hot balls.
The fireballs. No, I can't do it. I can't do it without being sick. And honestly, the Jelly Bellies that we did a couple weeks ago almost made me sick, even though it was a really fun game. So unfortunately, I want to add a sound effect, and I don't know what one yet. So we're gonna have like or like I think maybe the Kool-Aid Man going, "Oh yeah," something like that.
Okay.
So insert sound effect here. Yeah. 1 out of 5.
1 out of 5 music notes
for Peeps.
And we're pretty solid on that.
We are pretty solid. Yeah, we're matching. So we'll see if we match on Alvin and the Chipmunks. So we had an episode that we watched from the original 1961 cartoon, and we're going to talk about that, but that's not the main thing, because that's not really part of our childhood. So we watched from 1983 the C Team, which was 1A. All of Alvin and the Chipmunks are broken up into 15-minute stories.
And if you've never seen it before, as a quick summary, Alvin and the Chipmunks is a cartoon that's basically about 3 orphan chipmunks that are adopted by this single lonely man, Dave Seville, and he finds out that they can actually sing, and then he turns them into like a touring band while they still like go to school and act like human children.
Yeah, they're like a boy band.
It's like the original boy band is Alvin and the Chipmunks, and they always tend to get in trouble. Alvin is the oldest brother. And he tends to kind of get in trouble. He's a bit of a troublemaker. It's like all fun trouble, but still he tends to get in trouble. Alvin, of course, always wears red. Simon, who's always in blue and has glasses, is like the smart brother. Mm-hmm. He's always doing science and things. And then Theodore, who is the youngest brother, who wears green. And Theodore is kind of like the happy, innocent brother and tends to like a lot of food. And they always tend to get into some sort of little trouble in the 15-minute story, and then they, find their way out. It's kind of a cute, cartoon story. And they ended up later on making it into a feature-length movie, as well as sequels to the feature-length movies.
A number of movies. So actually, just to dig into the history a bit, and we'll give kind of episode summaries before we do each one. We're changing our format a little bit, but to give you a little bit of history, there's this guy, I want to pronounce his name right, Ross Bagdasarian. And in the 1950s, he was doing novelty records. Do you remember what novelty records were? They were like one-hit wonder kind of songs that were sometimes goofy, sometimes like...
Yeah, we've discussed this before. I had the Erie Canal, which was a novelty record.
Yeah. I mean,
my version of it was that was the only song on it.
Right, that's a folk song, but they also had novelty records of like if you've ever heard the worst Christmas song in the world, Dominic the Donkey. Mm-hmm. But he did The Witch Doctor. Ooh, ee, ooh, ah, ah, like that song. I won't do more of it because then we'd have to probably pay somebody. So he did that song, and in that song, he had played around with this idea of speeding up the tape to make it sound kind of funny. So he decided to do that again, and he recorded all of the voices, and that became the Chipmunk song, 1958.
Wow.
Which is crazy because with Christmas music, you hear it every year, so it's like part of your childhood, even though really it was like part of my mom's childhood, and my dad's. So the Chipmunk song was the first Christmas song to get to number 1 on the Billboard charts for pop songs. And it was not beaten until, do you want to guess what song beat it? Christmas song?
Mariah Carey?
Yep, Mariah Carey. And she didn't even beat it the year that song came out. She beat it in 2019.
All I Want for Christmas Is You?
Yeah. But that's amazing to me. It stayed on that chart 61 years before it was beaten.
Huh.
So that's basically what started it all. And because of the popularity of this, then they had, like, a guest appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, so probably they animated it and then played it in 1958, and then eventually they had this cartoon in 1961, so it didn't last that long, but it had at least the idea of a little bit more who these characters were, kind of as Steve just pointed out, like Alvin's the troublemaker, Theodore likes to eat, Simon's kind of a nerdy character, and then Ross Bagdasarian passed away in 1972, but he had been doing stuff with the Chipmunks up until that point. They kind of went on hiatus until the 80s, and his son and his son's wife took over the franchise and came up with this idea to have like a cartoon starring these chipmunks, and they did the voices, and then it kind of really became quite popular again. We had the movie in 1986, which is the memory I'm going to talk about after we take our break. But the movie, The Chipmunk Adventure, came out. They had quite a bit of merchandising. Oh, do you remember Tiger, the handheld video games?
Yes.
They also had, like, Muppet Babies and a few other cartoons. They made one of the Chipmunks as well.
Now, what you're talking, the Chipmunk Adventure is not the live action movie.
No. This
was an animated movie.
Yeah, it was an animated movie in 1986. A full-length animated movie. And they tried to, we talked about this in another one of our podcast episodes, like, they did that with, like, My Little Pony. They were thinking about it with G.I. Joe, but then they released it on, like, TV and direct to VHS. Yeah.
Transformers had a movie that was in theaters. The Transformers, it was animated, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it had a phenomenal soundtrack to it as well.
Yeah, and then they had these VHS things, one of which we watched, that were mostly for holidays, like holiday themed.
Yes.
And they had, like, kind of like Abbott and Costello. Abbott and Costello made a bunch of movies like They Meet Frankenstein, They Meet the Wolfman, and they did plays on these. Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein, Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman, that kind of thing. And then in the 2000s, they had the live-action movies. So Alvin and the Chipmunks 2007, and then another video game that was based on that. And then the Squeakquel 2009, Chipwrecked 2011, and then Road Chip in 2015. Yeah, so it's been around for a long time, and so there would be kids who are like, you know, Gen Zers who also grew up with them, but in a different form than we did, which I think is kind of interesting.
Definitely. So that's really a long run. I mean, that's a 60-year run they've had since the first cartoon to now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give away my mom's age, but
let's not do that.
I'm thinking more my mom than my dad, because I don't know that he would have watched this, but I think she probably would have been around the age of the kids who would want to watch this in the 61 version, which is, to me, that's kind of neat. So we're going to take a break. We're going to take a break and deal with our dog who is clicking across the living room right now. I hope that doesn't come up on the thing, but that's what happens when you have a small podcast. And we will come right back. We're going to talk about some of our memories, and then we'll get into the episodes. This podcast is supported by its creators
and listeners like you.
Help keep our show ad-free by visiting our website, stopruiningmychildhood.com.
There you can find links to our social media.
And this very podcast you're currently listening to.
Both Megan and I are authors, and you can find links to our books on our About page.
And on our Watch With Us page, you can find videos and links for all the shows and movies we discuss on the podcast.
And more importantly, links to buy the nostalgic snacks we review as well.
We also post bonus content about once a month.
So like, subscribe, and follow.
For a small independent podcast like ours, it really does make a difference. Thanks. And now, back to the show. All right, so we're back. This is Megan.
And this is Steve.
And what are your memories of Alvin and the Chipmunks?
So, I mean, Alvin Chipmunks ran from 83 till 90.
Yeah.
So I mean, roughly, I'm thinking I was 6 through my early adolescence. So I do remember it quite a bit. I mean, it wasn't a cartoon I would say defined my childhood like G.I. Joe or Transformers, right? Something like that. Because also, if you think about it, it really didn't have action figures, which is really how me and my brothers dealt with things. But I will say, I remember it being something I watched a lot. It was because it was part of like the Saturday morning cartoon block.
That's what I was going to say too. Yeah.
And I do have one major memory with the Chipmunks, which is when I was young. This would have been in '87.
Okay.
So maybe I'm 9 or 10 years old, depending on when it came out. Burger King had a promotion where if you bought food at Burger King, you could spend like an extra $6 or $7 and get a plush Alvin and the Chipmunk toy.
Oh.
It wasn't like part of a Happy Meal like McDonald's does, because
Yeah.
Burger King does those too. This wasn't like a little free cheap one. It was like probably a 7 or 8 inch plush toy, right? So it was an extra like $6 or whatever, but it was kind of just a promotion they had. And it was in '87, so I'm thinking it was probably tied to the movie.
Probably, yeah.
That came out in '86,
Yeah.
right? And the thing was, though, is like with some of those promotions at fast food restaurants and stores, it was a different available every week. Mm-hmm. And so at the time,
they'd have like Alvin on like week 1, and then Simon the next week, or one of the Chipettes, maybe. Yeah.
And so where I was at in my life at the time, and kind of my family life and things, I didn't have like a ton of toys and things at this point. I remember my grandmother bringing me to Burger King for something, and I got Alvin, and I got Simon, but never got Theodore.
Oh, sweetie.
And I really didn't care for that. Although now when I looked them up when I'm doing research for the podcast, because I remember Alvin looked just like the cartoon. So did Simon, but where Alvin in the cartoon has a yellow letter A on his shirt, and the others don't have anything, on the plush toys they had their initial.
Oh, okay.
So like Simon had his long blue shirt, but he had a white S on.
Okay.
Theodore had his green shirt. I don't recall this at the time, but like I said, I didn't have Theodore. But as I look back on it, he had a pink T on his shirt for Theodore, which just looks weird on the green shirt.
The green.
So I'm like, maybe I'm glad I never got Theodore. But at the same time, I remember it bothered me that I didn't get the last Chipmunk.
But she bought you 2 of them. That was
I'm
nice
not blaming
of her.
anyone. I'm just saying, I don't know if we like missed that week or what the deal was.
They might not have made as many.
Yeah, I just don't recall the situation. I mean, this was in Texas. This was,
right.
And I don't think it was, but I mean, something like that would have been a national thing.
Right.
But yeah, that's just kind of a weird memory that came back to me as I was doing research of this. So, what are your memories?
My memories. I'm really angry that I couldn't find the movie because I wanted us to watch the movie. And the movie is essentially not available. And you can buy a VHS of it for a couple $100 is what I found. But I was either in kindergarten or first grade, and the movie came out like in June, and they took us on a field trip where we walked from our school. Shout out to anybody listening who went to Roy B. Kelly. Blue and white our colors be. But they walked us from the elementary school out down, and I think we stopped. So at the bottom of the hill from our school was a park. Even though we had a playground at the school, there was another park and a racquetball club. And it's just very 80s to say that. It didn't last much past the 80s. But there was a park. And I think we had lunch there, and then we kept walking to the movie theater. So the Palace Theater in Lockport, and we went to see Alvin and the Chipmunks movie. And then we did it again. So I'm not sure which year was which, but we did another year of the same field trip, but with the Care Bears movie.
Oh, yeah, that was around the same time.
And I remember really loving the Care Bears movie, so if we can find that. But yeah, so I really liked... I really liked the Chipettes. I thought that movie was pretty fun. It's like an adventure where they kind of go all over the world, like kind of inspired by Indiana Jones, my guess would be, from what I can recall. But other than that, it's kind of funny because I have the same memory of this as you do. Like this one moment where it was kind of a big deal, but for the most part, it's on Saturday morning. There's a bunch on Saturday morning. You know, you're eating your cereal and it's on, you know. But it really was not that memorable to me outside of that field trip, which I just thought was such a cool, fun thing.
Yeah.
You know. So let's see if it does it hold up and does it match our memories.
All right, so we actually watched 4. Well,
Yeah.
we watched 3 from the 1983 to 90 series.
Mm-hmm.
But,
and I should say too that I watched 2 of the movies from the 2000s.
Oh, okay. But we did see. So the first thing we had watched was we went back and watched the 1961 special cartoon.
Yes,
which was entitled Theodore's Dog.
The Alvin Show. That was the original
The Alvin Show was the
title
original
of the
title,
show.
yes.
Yeah.
And the episode we saw was Theodore's Dog,
Yep.
which was all about kind of Theodore trying to sneak a dog in because Dave said they couldn't have pets because they travel so much for the band. And Theodore, like, adopted this dog and kept sneaking it in and, like, put it in the basement. And then the dog's climbing through, like, the ductwork. It was kind of funny. It was an interesting
It was
cartoon.
kind of funny. The animation is very cheap.
Well, you know, it reminded me of very early's Peanuts, which is probably around the same time.
So I was going to say the Archie cartoons, which I know are done by Hanna-Barbera, but that same, like, we drew this very quickly.
Yeah.
But I did like, Dave is kind of mean in this.
A little bit,
He's
yeah.
more like a manager and a little bit less like a dad. Mm-hmm. But I did like the ways that he tries to hide this dog. At one point, he hides it in the ductwork.
Yep.
And it's this cute little basset hound, and it's like... and we just talked about our dog. Our dog is part hound and part beagle, and she makes about the same face. And at one point, he's like, "Come on, girl, come on." And she goes... and just like plops herself down.
Yeah.
And Steve and I were like, that's our dog right there.
Yeah, at one point he's like dragging it by the leash and the dog's just sliding on the floor. Yep, there's a scene where the dog howls and Dave hears it, and so Theodore starts barking, trying to, like, you know, cover for the dog.
I thought, though, it was a lot like a traditional sitcom. Like, there's a family, there's a dad, the dad doesn't want the kid to have a dog, the kid, like, I could see, like, a live-action sitcom of, like, a kid hiding the dog in its room and, like, feeding it scraps, you know, like, that kind of thing.
Right.
But Dave is very focused on the music, and they have to practice, and they have to tour, and, like, all of that, so... And it was kind of fun to watch a Theodore-centric episode. Where he was not eating everything.
Yes.
Although he did get blamed for eating everything. Because
he did, because the dog ate it, yep.
Yeah.
So that brought us to season 1 of the 1983.
Oh, wait, but I want to say one more thing. The last thing I want to say before we move to the 83 is that it is very clear that one person is doing all the voices for the Chipmunks. Because Alvin, Simon, and Theodore have the same... When the other two brothers come into it... Alvin, Simon, and Theodore have the same voice, and if you close your eyes, they're indistinguishable.
Yeah.
Which I was like, so that was the only thing there. But it was a fun, cute, like, 12 minutes.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
And so we jumped to season 1 of 1983. Now the Chipmunks is now the name of the show, and the episode's name is the C Team. And what it is basically Alvin borrows Dave's watch for show and tell. And on the way to or from school, there's this group of bullies who basically bully the Chipmunks, and they take the watch. So then the makers of Alvin the Chipmunk decide to make this a tie-in with the A-Team, which must have been in its heyday at this point.
It was like the number one show on TV, or at least the number one, like, action.
So we have an animated Mr. T.
Yes.
Who I'm almost positive is voiced by Mr. T.
It's definitely voiced by Mr. T. My question here was... So I know, I understand stunt casting. Mm-hmm. I have 2 questions. Number 1, I know that A-Team is a popular show. We're going to talk about that actually next week because we saw Mr. T and we're like, oh, we should do the A-Team.
Yes.
But why the first pilot episode? You're doing a cameo appearance in the pilot.
Unless they're trying to play off the popularity.
I guess.
But I think that's 2 different demographics, right? The A-Team seems to me like it's
that's my
adults and maybe teenagers. maybe little kids that are in the living room with them.
Yeah.
Right? It's a primetime show, but it's not the same group you're trying to grasp with cartoon.
No, but this is, I have to say, this is full-on Mr. T, like with all his gold jewels and, everything.
And I'm wondering if there's a tie-in here, and maybe we'll touch on this next week a little bit, but there was also a 1980s Mr. T cartoon.
So that might have been why.
And I wonder if this led to that, or if there was a tie-in here somewhere,
or that they played the Mr. T cartoon and then this, like one after the other.
That
because
you're
right, obviously with the A Team. Well, the thing about Alvin and the Chipmunks is this. Like I said, this is 1A. So each of these with commercials is 15 minutes.
Yes.
It is not meant for older kids. It's really.
It's a quick, fast. Yes.
8 would be the oldest. I maybe a 10-year-old, but. If they had younger brothers and sisters, but it's like for 5, 6, 7-year-olds, right? So they see him and they go, Mr. T can help us. And we're like, wait, what?
Yeah. And it basically becomes an animated version of the A-Team.
Yeah.
Where they're like building this contraption that they're going to zip line across the yard and break into the clubhouse of the bullies and steal the watch back.
My favorite part of this episode is that they go in to this restaurant. Mr. T's just trying to have a meal. He's eating a steak. And they're like, we need your help, Mr. T, with bullies. And he goes, bullies? I hate bullies.
Yes.
It's so funny. By the way, I if I can link this in the blog, I will. But there is this other podcast called Bob and Sherry, and they had Mr. T on Talking Turkey, where people asked him Thanksgiving questions. Mm-hmm. And it is hilarious. He seems like a really nice guy, but he hates bullies. So there's, as Steve said, there's all these contraptions, there's traps, and they don't work. So they go back to Mr. T and they're like, it didn't work. And Mr. T says, what, are you going to be a quitter? I hate quitters! Yeah. So he hates everybody.
Well, Mr. T's trying to instill in them some values.
Yeah, don't quit.
Perseverance.
And be kind.
Be kind.
Yeah. But they have this song, Chipmunk Trouble. Simon is a scientist, so he's like, we should go over it with a hot air balloon and get into the house that way. I mean, maybe just go up to the front door, right?
Yeah, it's really, it's interesting and it's quick. There's also a song called The C-Team that's in it.
So at the end, Mr. T bullies the bullies.
Basically, yeah, he just gets it back.
He just gives it back to them. And then the bullies give the watch back, and then they buy them all milkshakes, and that's it. Oh, we forgot to say, too, this show, I did not remember any plot from this show, but the intro song. I love it. I love this intro song. We're the Chipmunks is, in my opinion, one of the best intro songs of all time. It tells you exactly what the show is, like that classic 80s. Mm-hmm. Here's what the show is about. But it's very catchy. It's like a genuine...
It definitely is, yeah.
Yeah.
So that leads us in the second part of this episode.
The second part...
Which is the Chipettes.
1B, the Chipettes.
And they introduced the female version of the Chipmunks. But in this version, I don't recall this being their original introduction. It's like a trademark violation, where the Chipettes are going by the Chipmunks and booking gigs under their name.
So we have Eleanor, Brittany, and Jeanette. So Brittany is like Alvin.
Yes.
Eleanor is like Simon, and Jeanette is like Theodore.
Right.
Just little chubby chipmunk cheeks. The thing, I'm going to say a word that Steve is going to hate here. So just to let you know, I know you're not going to like this. For me, I think it's the right move to bring the Chipettes in because you need the female energy on the show. I know you don't like it when people talk about energies. But I think that one of the reasons that this show appealed to both, it's not like some of the other cartoons we watch were very gendered, right?
Right. This broadened their base.
Strawberry Shortcake.
They could have little girls that could see the Chipettes.
Yeah. Strawberry Shortcake eventually went down to like 1 or 2 male characters. Then by the new version, there's just one guy.
Tossed them, yeah.
And G.I. Joe had Lady Jane and it had Scarlet, but again, not really balanced. And this is really more of a balanced show for boys and girls to enjoy. So I kind of like that. I think it's interesting that let's talk about wardrobe. The Chipmunks are wearing oversized shirts that maybe Dave threw away.
Yeah, I'm not sure what he put them in, but yeah, they're oversized shirts.
Because in the cartoon version, the Chipmunks and the Chipettes are probably about, what do you think, child size, right? Like they're like maybe a 4-year-old.
Yeah, they're in the cartoon. Yeah, they're probably toddler size.
Yeah, they're toddler size. So it looks like, but the Chipettes come out to do their first number in what looks like 1940s lingerie that like Ginger Rogers would wear in a movie with Fred Astaire.
With the boa.
Like the boa and the silky dresses, and they have the wardrobe. They're not always in the same clothes, like
right.
Alvin, Simon, and Theodore are. So they have a lot of wardrobe changes. And I thought they would match the colors up. Brittany is in pink, and Eleanor sometimes is in blue, sometimes is in purple, and Jeanette sometimes green, sometimes yellow. So sometimes the colors match, but not always, because sometimes they're in costume.
But they play off of their counterpart.
Yeah, and I actually thought it was a cute... So basically, the Chipmunks and the Chipettes end up having to play the same venue.
Yeah, and then they compete for it. The Chipmunks dress up as the Chipettes and drag and try to do a really bad job so that the Chipettes don't get it and the Chipmunks do.
And then the Chipettes kind of sabotage the microphone. So it's this one-upmanship, and then eventually they have to share this like dressing room. And it's, again, this very classic sitcom, like, I've seen that, it's a trope, right? I've seen it in probably 4 or 5 sitcoms, like, you have a brother and sister fighting, they're sharing the same room, they put, like, a tape down the middle. Right. This is your half of the room, this is our half of the room.
And in the end, they end up singing together and being a good show.
And they realize because, they realize that, the Chipettes, this is their big break. And they've been performing for a while, but the girls haven't. And the other thing we didn't mention is that a lot of the songs are like parodies of popular songs at that point.
Yes.
Like, We Aim to Please is a riff on We Got the Beat.
Yeah.
There's some song that was a Michael Jackson song, I'm not sure.
What's great also in this is that the entire competition is useless and doesn't need to be done, because the first time they realize that they're playing as the Chipmunks, Dave goes, I'll talk to our lawyers. And later in the episode, he goes, the lawyers said they don't have a leg to stand. Like, they can't be the Chipmunks because there's already a Chipmunks band.
Yeah. But that's why they're the Chipettes.
That's true.
And then they become friends. And then they fall in love. No, I'm just kidding.
I feel like throughout the cartoon series, they have this, like, friend, but, like, competitive vibe with the Chipmunks, right?
Yeah.
So that led us to our third
episode.
Like, mini episode that we have.
Uncle Harry.
And so this Chipmunk con man sees the Chipmunks on TV and decides to parade as their uncle, and says that he knows who their real mom is, and she's sick, and she needs money for an operation. Yeah. And so he starts touring with the Chipmunks while Dave is home.
Which, by the way, I just want
to... And taking in the money that they're making.
This is... So, there's a lot of, like, joy in the first 2 episodes. Like, they're trying to overcome the bullies, and then they're fighting with some girls, but they're making friends. This is the saddest storyline.
Here they're just being exploited by a con Chipmunk.
They're being exploited, but they're being exploited because he says that he knows their mom, and she didn't mean to give them up and abandon them, and they haven't really been adopted yet, so they could go back and be with their moms.
Yeah.
There's these 3 orphans who are being taken in by a con man.
And I'm like,
so
wow,
sad.
Chipmunks, way to hit the nail on the head. Like you're in the 80s... doing a cartoon about the exploitation of child stars.
Oh, yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah,
things got dark real quick.
Yeah, they really did. I really liked Harry's voice here. It was like the Chipmunks, but a little bit scratchier, the way that they did that. Some of these, even in the 80s, I'm guessing because of the process involved, they had to talk a little bit slower and then speed it up past normal. So some of it's like, wait for me, Theodore. Like, once in a while. But also, these are the first 2 episodes, so it's possible by later episodes that they smooth things out. Yeah. But I wanted to say they have a scene where Harry takes them to Niagara Falls, and I looked at Steve and I was like, that really does look like Niagara Falls. Like, they got the topography.
Yeah, they did pretty good. Yeah.
Not just the waterfall, but like the surrounding area. From that area.
The other thing with the voices is I'm wondering, when you look at the voiceover cast, 80% of the characters in the cartoon are voiced by the same guy.
Well, that's
and then there's
son.
a few other voiceover people, but he's doing 80% of them.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if he played with timing a little bit to try to separate voices.
It's possible. And so his wife, I forget her name at the moment, but his wife did Theodore.
Yes.
And he did Alvin and Simon.
And Dave. And there was a number of other, yeah. And if there's not guest stars, but if there's one-shot appearances of characters, he did a lot of those as well.
Right. So they're in Niagara Falls, and they are doing all these shows. They're exhausted, and he's like, we have to raise enough money to go and see your mom. I don't know where she's supposed to be that they need so much money. And he puts it all in a cash box. They go under the covers pretending to be ghosts to frighten him. Yeah,
because they find out that it's not true.
And then he runs away to Alaska.
And he runs to Alaska, and they get their money back.
But I don't know how he had enough money to get to Niagara Falls from Niagara Falls to Alaska. But there's no real humor in this episode at all. At all. Oh, we did watch part of Trick or Treason too.
But the big part of this was really that. And, normally, sometimes if we're doing, a movie here, I'll do, reception, how it was received. That's a little different with a show. What I'll say, is we talked a little bit about this. This show ran for 8 seasons.
Yeah.
Which is pretty long, especially for a cartoon.
For a cartoon, especially,
It rebranded itself a few times during that, but it was still the same cartoon. In seasons, it was Alvin the Chipmunks. In season 6 and 7, it became just the Chipmunks. And then in season 8, it became the Chipmunks Go to the Movies. And that whole last season was basically them doing different movies, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think because they were running out of story, maybe, by 8 seasons.
But it had to be received fairly well.
It was received, but I will say the one thing that we touched on a little bit here, but I want to really focus us on, is I think the one thing that makes Alvin and Chipmunks different, and it makes it memorable, is music.
Yeah.
Right? The soundtrack to this series of 8 series or 8 seasons was the music, right? Now, most of it is covers, but over the 8 seasons, this show had 192 songs.
That's crazy.
Right? There was sometimes 2 or 3 songs an episode.
Yeah.
That the Chipmunks are singing.
Yeah.
A lot of them are covers, or covers where the words have just been changed a little bit. Mm-hmm. Although, in season 6 and 7, the majority of songs are originals.
Interesting.
And then 8 goes back to covers, probably because they're movies.
Right.
So they're probably using movie soundtrack.
Yeah. The thing about that is that it's good that you brought that up, because I did think that the music was fun. I think for a kid it would be great. Fun. And like I said about the opening theme song, that's great. And even some of the parody lyrics kind of got stuck in my head from the covers that they did. But I think that it reminds me of something, it's like a Partridge Family, right?
Yes.
It's a sitcom, and then there's this other element. The movies from the 2000s, I'm not going to go into them. The first one does not have the Chipettes. The second one does.
Yep.
But
the Squeakle.
Yeah, the Squeakle. But it's interesting with those that they chose to have them actual chipmunk size. So that plays a part of it. But
also plot. A lot of music.
But they had what I was going to say. They have a lot of musical numbers. They have that story is again very similar to this episode with Harry. They've been taken in by Dave. He is looking for a musical act. He kind of becomes like a father to them. Then they're kind of pulled in by this producer, and it's really like a music biopic, like the Rise and Fall and Rise Again, where they, instead of doing like drugs, they like are by the pool just eating massive amounts of food, like things like that, staying up all night, and then they're touring constantly, so they're exhausted. And so Dave is very concerned for them. But yeah, again, the music's important for all of those. So they kept true to the original.
That's what I was going to say. One of the things I will give credit for is through the son and his wife, the father who created this. Right, it was started by someone playing around with a record in 1957 to see what happens when you speed up the music and it sounds like Chipmunks. Right, and they kept the music motif for 60 years. You know, if you remember Alvin and the Chipmunks as just like a cartoon about chipmunks, you're doing it an injustice. Because the music is really the central piece. The fact that they're a band, the fact that they're singing, you know, even to the point where the very, very, very beginning of the cartoon, when Dave meets them, they're out in the rain by his window trying to find someplace dry, and they sing, right?
Yeah.
And they sing a Chipmunk song, but it's to "O Silent Night." Right? That's the very first song they sing. And that's what gets him to bring them inside. Right? So there's always this music connection to it. I think that's really important. So looking at that then, let's do our musical note rating. What do we rate out of 10 music notes?
Let's pause for the sound effect. Let's not pause for the sound effect. I'm gonna put that in the last part of it.
You have a lot of editing to do this.
I have a lot of editing. Okay, yeah, so out of musical notes, if you haven't heard us before, we do 1 out of 5 for the snack, and then we do 1 out of 10 for the show.
And it's always different. It's always a different rating system.
Yeah, we talked about, like, do we want to do stars, and we're like, let's just pick something random.
We change it so it's something that connects to the feature every time. Yeah, the feature.
What do you think?
I'm going to give it, you know, it's a Saturday morning cartoon. It's something I remember from my childhood. Does it hold up? Yeah. I mean, I'm an adult now. We did watch 3 of these little episodes. We watched the original. It was entertaining. I mean, this is how I look at it now that I'm an adult. Would I sit my kids in front of it? Yeah, I think I would. I think it's entertaining. I don't think there's anything bad. And I think it holds up.
I think if we had kids, I think I'd be fine having it on in the background, like, while I make breakfast. It held up to the extent that I liked it as an adult about as much as I liked it as a kid. So like a 6,
I'm going to give it a 7.
6. Okay.
I'm going to give it 7 music notes.
All right, a 7 from Steve, 6 for Megan. So 6.5 musical notes. Oh, now we can pause for the sound effect. Yeah! 6.5 musical notes.
Is that 6 music notes in a quarter note?
A quarter note, yeah.
But that makes it confusing because it's half.
3 half notes.
Let's just go. It's 6.5. It's 6.5.
We forget. I forget my music theory, and I play a number of instruments.
Yes.
I can't remember right now. So 1 lonely quarter note for Peeps. 1 out of 5, and maybe not even that. Maybe a rest for
Peeps
the Peeps.
Can burn forever.
Stop. But 6.5 musical notes for Alvin and the Chipmunks, so not too shabby.
Not too bad.
We were going back and forth about what to watch next week, and we decided to go with the A-Team because Mr. T was in this episode, so we're super excited about that. I don't know that I've ever seen a full episode of the A-Team.
I used to watch it as a kid, but I don't remember a lot. But I remember the premise. But it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to watch.
So it'll be fun, and join us there. Join us to talk about the A-Team next week. And in the meantime, you can find links for all of the episodes that we talked about today. The 1961 Theodore's Dog, as well as the 1983 episodes, and a link for the 1994 Trick or Treason, which we watched but didn't quite have the time to talk about today. And you can find that on our blog, Watch With Us, which is on our website, www.stopruiningmychildhood.com. Until then, my name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.